redistricting.
Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. I'm Jeff Pender, joined here today with my colleague at Mississippi Today, Taylor Vance. Taylor, hello.
Hey, Jeff.
We have a special guest today. We have Mr. Jarvis Dortch. He is Executive Director of the ACLU of Mississippi, also a former legislator. Knew you at the Capitol. Good to see you again.
Retired from there.
Retired, yeah.
So you don't miss being under the Capitol dome during this time right now?
Somehow get that question still today, and I'm like, it's such an easy answer for me. I just wonder why people are still asking. I understood it like a few years ago.
Yeah.
No, I don't miss it. I miss some of the people.
Sure.
Yeah. Some really good people over there, but that process is a lot.
Right. And you served District 66 in the House.
Yeah.
That is Hinds County, and you were there. You were elected in 2015 and left in 2020 to take this post, correct?
Yep, summer 2020, when we concluded that long summer session.
Oh, the never-ending COVID session, as it is fondly recalled.
I think I was one of 100 people that left with COVID. So,
that's
and that 2020 COVID was very different from.
I remember it was
But that was actually 2020. I know everything that was going on. It was a very hellish time, but the legislature worked well that session. I think we all had a common enemy, and it was Tate Reeves. And that, so it wasn't Republican, Democrat. It was like the Speaker wanted the House all together, and to his credit, he kept his word on what we were going to do that session. So that was actually a very productive time. And, it's not my favorite time there because of what was going on, but
right.
Felt like we actually did some important work over that summer.
As you may have heard, it's going really smoothly this year, this session. But look, appreciate you coming on again, and I think we're gonna probably focus on something we've talked about on a few episodes. It's a huge pending decision, most likely from the U.S. Supreme Court in the and I always fear I'm saying it wrong, the Louisiana versus Calais case. And I guess, again, we've dealt with this several times, but give us a brief synopsis of why this is important and what we may be looking at with this Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, so this case, it's got a real complicated procedural process. This actually started a few years ago with a group of black voters in Louisiana challenging the congressional districts there, and a court agreeing with them that there should be 2 majority black districts in Louisiana. They gave the legislature an opportunity to draw those districts. The legislature over there drew a very ugly district that was unnecessarily long, that I think stretches from Baton Rouge to like Shreveport. The court said it complied. It was a district where black voters could elect the candidate of their choice. But a group of white voters then sued and challenged the state, saying that district violated the 14th and 15th Amendment of the Constitution, and that the Voting Rights Act essentially is unconstitutional. So that's where we are today. That's what the court is deciding, whether or not the Voting Rights Act and the use of race, and even in correcting past harms or current harms, can legislatures use race in drawing an apportionment.
Yeah, and I mean, am I correct in saying that a lot of a big fear that proponents of the Voting Rights Act have is that if essentially there is no either guardrails or there is no requirement that legislators have to create districts that give black voters or communities, minority communities a realistic chance to elect voters of their choice, then essentially that means legislators can just gerrymander any type of district they want, whether that be judicial districts, legislative districts, congressional districts. I mean, is that?
Yeah, I mean, and they're directly challenging Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and that's an important piece because Section 2 is what brought democracy to Mississippi. In 1979, about 70% of eligible black Mississippians were registered to vote, but we only had 4 black members of the state legislature. And that's because Mississippi used multi-member districts and gerrymandering to prevent black voters from being able to elect candidates of their choice. So it took enforcement of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, to get those districts drawn, to open up access to courts. And to take that away is very, as we saw in 1979, I think the black population was even higher then. But it's, with the software they have now, you can easily see how a lot of black districts could be gutted, or black voters could be packed into a handful of districts. And the court has said that's going to be fine if they change, if they go with the Calais argument. The court has already said you can use party to draw district lines. So you can draw a Republican legislature. It's okay for you to draw as many Republican districts as you want. We know in Mississippi and a lot of other southern states, drawing a district to favor Republican voters means you're drawing a district to favor white voters, and that's still a reality in Mississippi.
And to me, almost ironically, this is being done in the name of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
But to your point, we're not talking about Mississippi's district lines already being exactly great or fair at the moment, correct? I mean, at some point, it's almost hard to picture how they could be further stretched or packed. Or
yeah, we were just a couple years ago involved in a legislative redistricting lawsuit, and our court, 3-judge panel, 3 judges appointed by Republican presidents, they agreed that these districts were violated the Voting Rights Act and ordered 3 new districts created by the legislature. 2 were created by the legislature, and we challenged 1, but eventually that all got settled out, and we had special elections last year. So it's still an ongoing thing. I think in Mississippi, the biggest issue is after, I think, 2012, when they did redrew lines, when they had after the Republicans won back the House, I believe, there were a lot of districts, at least 12 to 15 districts that looked like Mississippi. And what I mean is like they were like 40, 45% black or white. Those districts were districts that reflected the state. I think now there are just a handful of those districts, if that, where it's either these districts are heavily black or heavily white. And that just makes these districts are uncompetitive during general elections, which means we're not educating voters or engaging voters. So it goes beyond just making sure black voters have representation. We need representation throughout the state, and you're not getting that because lawmakers know it's so easy for them to get back to the Capitol.
And I believe the ACLU is also involved in some other litigation in the state, Section 2 litigation regarding the state Supreme Court districts as well. And I believe another federal judge in the Northern District, also appointed by a Republican president, ruled that there was a VRA violation for the Central Supreme Court District. And I know that's still pending. But
the remedy is still pending. Right now, what the court has ordered is, in the court's latest order, is they're giving the legislature this session to draw a remedial map. It doesn't. We have talked with some Republican leadership about this, and there's some interest, but it doesn't look like they're going to come around and do it. And if they don't draw a map, the judge has said she's going to adopt a map and move forward. That could be complicated by whatever happens with Calais. but she has indicated that she wants to take care of this because not only are those districts affected, she has an injunction on all of the state Supreme Court districts, so there can't be a election in any of those districts right now.
Right. Taylor, your latest update sounded like they said, yeah, we might get to that.
Get to that. Yeah.
And then you already recently had a report about an incumbent Supreme Court justice who tried to tried to qualify to run again and was told no, you can until districts are redrawn.
But it sort of strikes me as a little odd or ironic that we have this we're awaiting this court decision at the same time that we've had a lot of VRA litigation sort of in Mississippi going on right now, and it's all been dealing with Section 2.
Yeah, we've had it in Alabama and Louisiana. 2023, the Supreme Court issued a decision in Milligan versus Alabama. And we thought that at least settled things for a while. And the court said that the Voting Rights Act, that Alabama violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act by not drawing a congressional districts where black voters had enough representation. The remedy's been put in place. We thought we were settled, but we can't come back now, and they're looking at whether or not the Voting Rights Act itself is constitutional, and so that has us in a place where we don't know what's going to happen.
I was going to say, I mean, people are saying this decision is likely to be the death of the Voting Rights Act. Is that hyperbole, or you think that truly hangs in the balance?
If the court goes to the extent to what I think of, there's probably 3 or 4 justices that agree with this, that race shouldn't be used at all, even to correct harms or discrimination, that lawmakers cannot look at race in any way. If they say that, and like I mentioned before, you're not allowed to use race, but you're allowed to use party, and we're going to act like we're colorblind. We've seen that before. Like, that happened after Reconstruction, and the U.S. Supreme Court that said these discriminatory laws that were passed in states like Mississippi, well, they don't say black voters. It doesn't mean, of course, black voters are affected by this, but since they don't say it, it's constitutional. And we'd be back in a place like that where you could, the legislature could say, we're drawing 100 Republican-leaning districts. It just so happens black voters will lose representation.
Yeah. This may seem like a little bit of a silly question, but just sort of taking a step back, why are these types of legal cases important to the ACLU? I mean, why have y'all chosen to file a lot of these lawsuits and with legislative redistricting, state Supreme Court, and also in DeSoto County?
Yeah. For our office, when I came in 2020. We were trying to figure out what our priorities were going to be and to reshape our office. And we knew redistricting was going to be something that was going to happen for the first time in Mississippi without pre-clearance. So there wasn't any kind of federal backstop there. And we wanted to be in a position where if we saw there was, places where black voters were underrepresented, we wanted to be able to support communities and bring challenges. We thought the districts that were created in 2012 were violate the Voting Rights Act, but there wasn't a challenge brought. So those districts passed again in 2021, 2022. I felt like the legislature just doubled down on those districts. So we did bring a challenge there. The state Supreme Court districts have not changed since 1987. We know that we have only had one black Supreme Court justice at a time. They've all replaced each other, and they all have been appointed. None of them won that seat. And right now it feels like the position is we're going to have one black justice, and nobody will run against him. That person will get appointed because I guess the optics of having no black justices is,
in a state with the highest black population in the country.
Yeah, so we think it's time for the legislature to redraw those districts. There are a number of problems with those districts, including populations. The balance is way off where those districts are not balanced as far as equal population, but they're also drawn in a way to prevent black voters from being able to elect candidates of their choice. And that has been the case since 1987, but we made the argument with our partners and with some folks in Mississippi that stepped up to be plaintiffs, and the court agreed with us.
This pending decision is coming at a time when it would appear voting rights or the current setup is under challenge from many directions. What about some of the stuff on the federal level? How concerned are you right now, actually, the SAVE Act being in the news?
I think my biggest concern is, like, you have a president that is, because of his loss or whatever, in 2020, he's pushing a lot of false information out there, and he's pushing lawmakers. Conservative lawmakers used to be all about states' rights, and now they are trying to federalize the election process. So yeah, we're concerned about it. It's it will put a really big barrier for people to vote, and it would probably affect states like Mississippi the most and red states the most, because I had a lawmaker ask me earlier this session, I was like, is a driver's license proof of citizenship? And I was like, no, it's not. You're going to have a birth certificate or your passport. And Mississippi is one of those states where the lowest percentage of voters or Mississippians have passports. So we're going to have to see a lot of people that are going to have to figure out a way to prove their citizenship. I don't know where my birth certificate is at right now. I think I know where my passport is at because my wife keeps up with it. But then there's also the issue with married women who've changed their names or changed their last names, where that has to be addressed. It's a very unnecessary law, very complicated, and very could be very detrimental to the state of Mississippi and across the country.
With this decision or with the SAVE Act, what say they happen? What can be done, or are y'all going to keep pushing, or there's some?
Yeah, I mean, our priority, depending on what the decision is, going to matter what's written in that decision, because clearly, if they say race can't be used at all, we're in a different place. But if there's if it's a more nuanced decision that says race can be a part of it, that's kind of what the law is right now, which makes this very strange, because it's not. It's not, those districts aren't just all based on race. We saw that with our state legislative districts. Those 3 districts that were created, they were like 51% black. So these weren't just districts that were just drawn to have as many black voters as possible. There were other things taken into account. So our priority is going to be trying to implement that court decision with the state Supreme Court. Depending on how bad the decision is, we want to make sure that if individual actors come and start challenging their congressional district or their legislative district, that's what happened in Louisiana, where they sue and say their district violates their rights, and that forces the state to redraw those lines. We want to be in a position to challenge that, and especially if the state is not going to defend those districts. So we're going to have to work. And like I've told our team, we're here. We're here to work. You didn't come to be a part of ACLU to, especially at a time like this, without, wanting to be involved in this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Something that, I think has been sort of rolling around in my head that I think a lot of people like myself kind of take for granted is there was a lot of work over decades that attorneys, civil rights leaders, voters, candidates, put into having VRA protected districts on the congressional level and the state level. I mean, I think sometimes people think that this was something that happened, 50, 60 years ago. But I mean, Mississippi's first black person elected to Congress was Mike Espy. Mike Espy is still very much alive. This is not something that happened a few years ago. So I don't. Do you have any thoughts about that? There's been so much work that went into it, and we're potentially about to see it go.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people that think the Voting Rights Act was passed and that fixed everything. Just like Brown versus Board fixed everything. My parents went to school in Yazoo County in the 70s, and it was still segregated.
And integration was still, to some extent, it's still being dealt with.
A lot of this stuff has to be litigated. There's a lot of work to do it. So I think people do take that for granted, how much effort was put in to bring us to the point we're at right now. It is still with us, and there are a lot of people that worked on it are still with us. I've had the great opportunity to work with Carol Rhodes over the last few years and get to know him and learned. I've learned more from him in an hour than I would ever learn in law school. And just being able to hear him talk about these issues and take it back to what they were doing in the 80s and even the 90s, it would, and I've actually felt this from a couple of older, he calls somebody older, but older attorneys, more experienced attorneys.
Veteran attorneys.
Yeah, and even, some of the first Supreme Court justices that we interviewed before our lawsuit, where it was like they felt like all of the work they did was lost. And it felt they had this, not defeated, but it was like we did a lot of work to get where we're at, and overnight we're seeing it just go away. So that's been on my heart, I know, while I'm doing this work. So it is something I know that that weighs on them as well.
We've had a couple of guests on recently talking about Lead Representative Zakiya Summers, one of those. But this legislative session, there was an effort to maybe a preemptive move to have a state voting rights act. At this point, as they say, appears to be dead. Pending what happens, is that perhaps a way to try and deal with this in the future, tackle it from a state level? Do you think there could be a way to tap into some of, as you said, conservatives have talked about state sovereignty, state rights for many, many years? Is there a potential to get some bipartisan support on the state level?
I think as a tactic or a strategy, is right on track, because we definitely have to look at building out state protections, and that's voting, housing, civil rights overall. Those state protections are not in place in Mississippi, and we rely on the federal government for that a lot. And so when the federal government or the federal courts aren't there for us, we need to have some type of relief in our state courts. As far as an opportunity to get that passed, a few years ago, I was very happy and surprised that you had a lot of support for early voting.
Right.
Come out, a bill passed out of the Senate. I know the House chairman didn't bring the bill out, but from talking with him, I know he supported the bill. The politics of it is complicated. I think it's always weird to me, like the motivations of some of the legislators. Like, I can't get over, folks that don't want to do something, feeling like they have to do it, or that they can't do something that they want to do because whatever that political pressure is. I would hope something like that would happen, where those people, those lawmakers that work well together when they're allowed to work together, will come and pass something that is more proactive and protects all voters. Makes it easier for people to vote. We should all want Mississippi to not be last in voter participation.
Well, I know our state leaders certainly have a long track record of being proactive and protective.
particularly on voting
Yes.
issues. Well, a lot of eyes on this Louisiana case. Obviously, going to be a landmark decision one way or the other. As we speak, we are pre-recording this, and I think Taylor or one of y'all mentioned there's a decision hand down coming up soon. It could be by the time this airs, probably not, but we will be watching it as I know you will be, and appreciate you coming on, and would hope maybe you would come back when we have a decision to try and dissect.
Sure. Decipher what it means for Mississippi.
Right.
Would love to, and happy to talk about these issues and what we're doing, and appreciate this space to be able to do it, especially at length and not just a short couple sentences. So I appreciate this opportunity.
Well, it's very good to see you again, and we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.